Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce, Ukraine War News Update. First part thereof for the 4th of, is it the first part? I've done a breaking news update and that's really important. All sorts of stuff going on. This is the first of my normal videos I do for the 4th of March 2025. There is so much going on, I feel like I just need to do a 24-hour news, one-man news outfit. That's what I feel like, just insane. And my geopolitical videos have been like an hour long every day because there's that much going on. And I was thinking, God, yeah, I really do need to get them shorter because they're unmanageable, but I can't. There is just too much happening and it's all relevant. We need to have an understanding of all of this stuff to know how it all connects to Ukraine. Okay, let's start with the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below. And we have 1,340 personnel lost. That's a pretty high number, higher than we had seen where it's been at the low end of the range above 1,000. But drop in material. So 3 tanks lost, 8 AFVs, armoured fighting vehicles of all varieties. That's pretty low. 45 artillery systems is very high. That's over double the daily average. But we were seeing sort of 50 and 60, but that is still an excellent attrition there. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, good news there, and 101 vehicles and fuel tanks. So still losing a bunch of stuff, just fewer tanks and AFVs than we have seen. That could indicate a sort of culmination. I think it's difficult in some places on the front line. Well, both sides are just having a hard time of it. I think up in Kursk, the Ukrainians are actually struggling a little bit up in Kursk. There's a lot of, I think, destroyed material for the Ukrainians up there. But then in Kupiansk and Toretsk, the Ukrainians are pushing back and having some success, and indeed south of Pokrovsk. And then when you get further south from there, Velika Novosilka and Kharkiv, again, the Russians having some success. So it's a sort of mottled, it's a patchwork quilt of a front line. Okay, so that's pretty good figures for the Ukrainians. Now, no loss list from Andrew Perpetua, but he does say there are like 400 vehicle losses today. And I'm here to say it's too damn many for a single day. So that suggests that there is just a lot of kit still being destroyed. Absolutely. He said, I've only done 166 of them and I'm ready to go to sleep. It's out of control to have 400, to be honest. That was 12 hours ago. So whose vehicles, though? All of them. So both sides are taking quite a lot of vehicle hits there. Now, I reported this yesterday. I think it was cluster munition, Iskander cluster munition that came and took out a Ukrainian training event, and it was very controversial. There were official statements about this. There were casualties, probably quite a lot of them. We are hearing, well, some Canadian sources saying they're hearing that there were Canadian casualties there, that they were helping train Ukrainian forces in that region. So Viktor Kovalenko says, today the Russian ballistic missile, Iskander missile, struck the military training field at Cherkaska near Novomoskovsk, Ukraine, located in about 120 to 130 kilometers from the front line. According to the commander of the Ukrainian Land Forces, General Mikhailo Trapati, other news media, the missile struck the military base at the moment when hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers were gathered in one spot to report to their field commander. The estimated casualties are dozens of dead, more than 100 wounded. The training field is a hub of the 157th Mechanized Brigade. And that videos from the surveillance drone that was checking it out. But it could well be that there were Canadian casualties there as well, which will not go down well, of course. Okay, Michael Weiss reporting that Russia is finding it significantly harder to conduct combat operations against Ukraine because of a rise in Ukrainian long-range drone strikes on Russian weapons supplies, ammunition depots and fuel refineries, a senior commander has said. So these strikes are taking their toll, and that could also be why the Russians have culminated, that actually they're exhausted in terms of manpower, but also getting enough fuel and equipment to them when there are these long-distance strikes taking out these targets. And of course, there'll be a lot going on every night that we don't know about. There'll be strikes on particular ammunition depots, I'm sure, that we just don't know. Right. Anton Gerasienko said, I decided to post this video because it shows incredible determination of Ukrainian defenders in fighting and protecting their land. Warriors from the 225th Separate Assault Regiment threw Beehives into a basement where Russian soldiers were hiding after they ran out. Of course that's going to happen. Of course, it's been a long time. Love it. Hiding after they ran out of grenades. So here we have Russians holed up in a basement, which is there. You can see the whole of it there. And the Ukrainians running out of grenades are like, well, we've got some Beehives over here. Let's just literally pick them up and throw them down. So that's what they do. Poor old bees, to be fair. But yeah, that's one way of trying to flush out the enemy, I guess. I don't know if it worked, but certainly innovative. You can see all these hives around here. And again, another one. And then chuck it down as well. And there you go. Down the hatch. 3, 2, 1, and it's in. And I don't know if any of that cloud there is the bees coming out. Bees. Killer bees. Okay. So that happened. You can go and watch a whole video at your leisure. Now, on the Yevpatoria Highway, so this is in Crimea, around midday, a radar station from the S-300, S-400 air defense missile system was merrily burning, says PS01. The 96L6E radar is an all-altitude detector and costs tens of millions of dollars. This is a pretty decent bit of kit that is on fire, and I don't know why it's on fire, whether that's sabotage. It'd be great if it is sabotage. And that's always a good sign that things aren't going well for you if you're losing high level equipment to sabotage. Speaking of which, partisans in Tver, this is back in Russia proper, turned down a command post with a target illumination radar and missile guidance system of the S-300 air defense complex. The cost of the destroyed scrap metal was approximately $160 million. So that is another excellent haul there for the Ukrainians. Target illumination radar and missile guidance system for the S-300. So those two things together, possibly both sabotage, causing some excellent damage statistics for the Ukrainians. Good stuff. Right. New photos of Russian targets taken by Ukrainian intelligence using ICI satellites were published. Ukraine has 2 satellites, that I presume, plus access to a constellation of 44 more ICI satellites. ICI satellites can photograph anytime in any weather. Now, one of the things I was particularly worried about, or I am particularly worried about, given that the US is turning off all military aid to Ukraine forthwith, is the intelligence sharing. Now, apparently that is still taking place. They haven't switched off intelligence sharing yet, according to some sources. But I do think it will probably happen because I'm fairly sure Ukraine are not going to capitulate to the US's demands, because it now seems that Ukraine are against 2 superpowers, not just one. And if they turn off intelligence sharing, they need alternatives. Well, ICI, I was wondering who owns ICI, and it's actually a Finnish setup, the Finnish microsatellite manufacturer, founded in 2014, and now the world's largest synthetic aperture imaging radar constellation. Brilliant stuff. So that is, it has offices globally. So it does have, I think, offices in California, but they are Finnish, as far as I can work out, which would mean that, fingers crossed, they'd still be able to have access to that constellation of satellites, the Ukrainians. Excellent. Okay. Onto distant strikes. So 99 Shaheds thrown into Ukrainian airspace, 65 shot down, 32 suppressed by electronic warfare. That leaves only 2 to have found their targets, if we are to believe that the other 2 were successful. So that's good, pretty good interception rates from the Ukrainians there, better than we've seen for the last few days. Odessa was hit last night really hard. When I was doing a live with Greg and Prof. Gerdes, Greg was talking about how this was happening as we were speaking. Big explosions there. Substation has been hit. And in fact, I think there's been electricity blackouts today in Odessa. So that's just outside the city. There's also a report of an explosion near the port. I don't know exactly what the damage is, but quite a lot of fire going on there. It's looking fairly bad for Odessa. As reported last night, Odessa was hit. Some subscribers have been reconnected this morning, but still many households are left without electricity. Also an attack on a medical facility in Sumy last night. No casualties, but fire broke out a children's area of a polyclinic. So there were some strikes inside Ukraine. Also, Kherson was hit. I don't know what with, but there was a strike there causing the death of 2 policemen and 5 civilians being injured. Russians attacked with artillery, mortars, tanks, aircraft, drones. Oh, there you go, everything. 17 objects were damaged, including apartment buildings, private houses, kindergarten, post office cars. I mean, it's disgusting what they're doing there. I'm just putting a finishing touch on an article I'm writing with Brendan Kelly about Kherson, but also the use of drones outside of the war where they are hunting civilians. It's about the future of murder. Basically, it's a very macabre article saying actually we're seeing Russian mafia use these to take out some of their people. We're seeing cartels, drug cartels in Mexico actually doing that before this war, a long time before this war. 2017, I think it's the first time we heard about drones being used in that way. And this is an evolution of murder, and other places like Israel as well. So, and nothing to do with the war, just people killing other people for criminal purposes. But anyway, I'll let you know when that's out. Incoming news that an oil depot in Chertkovo, Rostov region in Russia is burning. Footages show a large fire on the horizon, presumably being the oil depot. Previously, explosions were heard and flashes of light were seen. So it's quite active inside Russia and occupied territories last night as the Ukrainians hit a number of places. Drone strikes hit a pipeline and industrial warehouse in Chertkovsky, Rostov region, not an oil depot as claimed earlier. The local governor has confirmed. So that's oil pumping station, oil pipeline, something like that. Hopefully will have a pretty similar effect. In addition to Chertkovo and Novoshakhtinsk, another place that was hit, additional explosions were confirmed by locals near the Syzran refinery in Russia. Fire broke out and a third confirmed strike on an oil refinery overnight by Ukrainian drones. Yet another oil facility is burning in Russia, says Tim White. That is a Syzran one. Production was, it was also hit by drones last month when production was suspended. I presume they've got it up and running only for it to be hit again. So this is 800 kilometers from the front line, this particular refinery, and seems to have been burning fairly well last night. So Ukrainian drones struck the Syzran oil refinery, the Novoshakhtinsk refinery, and Chertkovo oil depot or pipeline. And you can see 2 of them were either within occupied territories or very close there too, and then the Syzran refinery is a good deal of distance away there from the Ukrainian border. Then we also heard yesterday, this happened in the daytime yesterday, another fire and reports of explosion at the Perm gunpowder factory. So he says this evening, thick black smoke was seen, but the blaze is now said to be out. I've scoured media without finding pics, but I see they take kids around to learn about the production of rocket fuel, so that's nice. I did see a picture of a smoke plume, so that's why I said it was in the daytime, of Perm. I presume it was from that fire or explosion. Don't know what that was. Could have been just a fire, an accident. When you are dealing with explosives, things are going to be pretty challenging, but it might be sabotage and it could have been a strike. I don't know. Right, good news though, because that will hurt the Russian manufacturing of munitions. Right, Russian prosecutors, moving on to other bits and pieces, have sued hundreds of schools. Why have they sued these schools across the country for spending money on textbooks and classrooms rather than... Well, I mean, that's what they should be spending money. They are schools after all. But rather than spending that money on what? Replica weapons, dummy grenades, and realistic wound simulators to prepare children to fight Russia's next war. That sounds brilliant. The Russian government has introduced a new subject in the curriculum in the current academic year, Fundamentals of Security and Defense of the Motherland. It is part of an increasingly intensive program of militarization of schools intended to create a new generation of soldiers. I mean, this is just absolute brainwashing, isn't it? The program addresses children of all ages, from kindergarten to higher education. As young as 3, children as young as 3 are being given military training and familiarization. This doesn't come cheap. Those schools are now required to buy costly items, including replica weapons, stretchers, protective suits, gas masks, compasses, thermometers, medical splints, armbands, wound simulators, and gas detectors. The independent Russian news outlet Verstka reports that prosecutors have sued nearly 200 schools in 21 regions for not spending enough on military equipment. They argue that, that preparation for the army begins at school and requires special equipment. In one case, prosecutors say that school children's rights, quote, in terms of basic knowledge of the field of defence, were infringed. A Krasnodar prosecutor claimed that it, quote, could have negative consequences in the area of military, patriotic and spiritual moral education of minors. So on and so forth, and more in that thread. But just absolutely incredible that they're being forced to spend hundreds of millions of rubles, much of it unfunded by the state, on military training equipment instead of educational items. Parents have been forced to pay for the equipment as a charitable donation. One head teacher said one half comes from the state budget and the other half is done like this. In May, each class transfers a sum to the school account under the pretext of charity. My class gives 3,000 rubles, others gives 5,000 or 7,000 as best as they can. With this money, the director equips classrooms and whatever he deems necessary. They don't report in detail on the money. They just say, here's a shooting range they finished, here's the life safety course, etc., etc. Just incredible, isn't it? Absolutely incredible. Right, moving on. In Russia's main coal region, mines have begun to close and miners' wages have stopped being paid due to sanctions. Sanctions work, and the US is now apparently they are working on relieving sanctions on Russia. So well done. Let's grasp Ukrainian defeat from the jaws of victory, or grasp Russian survival from the jaws of decapitation. Oil prices continue to decline amid growing tensions between US and Ukraine. A day earlier, oil prices fell about 2%, hitting a 12-week low. Right, so this is something that Donald Trump said he was going to do. This was one of his weapons against Russia, but this isn't coming from the US. This is actually OPEC, as far as I understand it, OPEC Plus, actually shifting up production. So I think Saudi Arabia have a lot to do with this, and another nation I was reading. Oil prices collapsing, as you can see. Now, this is very bad for Russia because low oil prices mean they aren't making as much per barrel, and that is their best way of underwriting the war, the cost of the war, and prosecuting that war. So that is good news for Ukraine. It needs to go lower. It has to be said. It's been far too high for Russia. I don't know if Russia are paying this price or whether sanctions and the oil price cap is still in any way effective. I like to see this just as the US themselves were saying what they've said, JD Vance and Donald Trump and all their surrogates being wheeled out to slag off Ukraine. Meanwhile, someone gets up the Statue of Liberty and flies a Ukrainian flag. Absolutely love it. Awesome. Right, interesting that according to a survey conducted by Survation at the end of February, Zelensky is now ahead of Zaluzhny in the ratings by quite a distance, 44% to 21%. That's, as Max24 says, it's hard to come up with a more competent PR campaign than Trump's one. So Trump has managed to absolutely he's thrown Zelensky back into first position in presidential voting intentions. Zaluzhny was ahead of him. So that is absolutely fascinating. You got Alexei Arestovich. Some people are saying that the Americans might try and get behind him, but he'll be pro-Russian. You got Timoshenko. You got Poroshenko, previous leaders. I don't know Razumkov. Obviously, Budanov is the intelligence leader. Honcharенko, sorry, he's quite famous. He's a little bit divisive, but nowhere near. And Zelensky right out in the lead, 44%, with Zaluzhny on 21%. So incredible change there. Now, the United States is pausing all military aid to Ukraine, as we've heard already today, as he determines, or until Trump determines that the Ukrainians have shown enough commitment to a good faith peace negotiation. A senior Trump administration official has told Fox News, quote, "This is not a permanent termination of aid, it's a pause," the official emphasised. The orders are going out right now. the official said this was in response to Zelensky's conduct over the last week. So this is why I am routinely saying this. This is my new official position, which is that the calculation from the White House is actually this. We'd rather have Ukrainian civilians die than Russian soldiers die in order to force peace. So in order to force peace through, they're stopping weaponry coming to Ukraine that will protect civilians, things like Patriot interceptors and whatnot, because Zelensky was a bit rude because he didn't say thank you enough. So because he didn't say thank you enough and wasn't wearing a suit, Ukrainian civilians are going to die, and the US would rather Ukrainian civilians die than Russian soldiers die. That's their calculation. Otherwise, they'd be providing weapons to Ukraine to support Ukraine and forcing Russia to the negotiations by them being in a bad position and Ukraine prevailing and peace through strength, right? But they're not going for that. They want peace through Ukrainian capitulation. That is why the White House calculation is now, we'd rather have Ukrainian civilians die than Russian soldiers die in order to force peace. End of. That's where they're at. So, Fox News and RT, indistinguishable propaganda channels, says Tim White, both revel in the fact that traitor Trump has stopped all arms shipments to Ukraine. It's said to be temporary to force Zelensky to negotiate. Again, no forcing of Russia, no forcing of Putin. And we talked about this in a live stream last night, myself, Prof. Gerdis and Greg Terry. The complete absence of any criticism of Putin or any demands for concessions from Putin. Everything is about Ukraine and what the victim does here. It's absolutely disgusting. It's like going out and blaming a rape victim. It was all her fault that you were walking there. You were too weak. You're too vulnerable. You're wearing a short skirt. Therefore, it's your fault. And do you know what? Not only is it your fault, we're not going to help you. And actually, we're now going to make it easier for the rapists to continue doing what they're doing. We're just going to help them do that. That's what we're going to do. A senior Pentagon official speaking on condition in anonymity told Bloomberg that the halt of military aid to Ukraine includes all military aid in transit and waiting in transit areas in Poland. So it's not just stuff in the US, it's stuff that's already been flown out to Poland. They're stopping that from getting to Ukraine. Now, Ukraine Center for Counter and Disinformation head Kovalenko has said there will be a wave of manipulation and pressure on society. We must wait for official information, as media will inflate the panic. So I don't want to be doing that, but I think this is what's happening. Diplomacy is ongoing and any turbulence is part of diplomatic maneuvers. So obviously trying to downplay the impact. There are no changes, though, in US intelligence support to Ukraine so far. This remains separate from weapons provision, according to RBC, reporting that sources say in the military political circles that it's business as usual. So that's good news at least. Well, no, it's less bad news. The United States is drawing up a plan to potentially ease sanctions on Russia as Donald Trump seeks to repair ties with Moscow and end the war in Ukraine. So that's forcing Ukraine to capitulate and give all the concessions that Russia want, while easing Russia, while putting in fact, they're undoing pressure on Russia, and they're taking the pressure that they were putting on Russia and putting that pressure on Ukraine. Which is a complete change of sides. Right. David French, fun fact, he ran for president back in, I don't know, it might be in as way back as 2004, I don't know, I don't know, whenever he ran for president. I've debated him on radio. We had a massive debate. He's a Christian conservative, but he's an anti-Trumper. He's a lovely guy, absolutely lovely guy, David French. But we disagree politically. Anyway, if you want to go and check, it's on my ATP Atypical Philosopher channel, which is my sister channel. You can see me debate him on cancel culture. Read all this, he says. It explains exactly how Trump is giving Vladimir Putin a massive gift at exactly the moment when Russia is experiencing unsustainable losses. Unsustainable losses there. Okay, so let's look at what the Institute for the Study of War has to say about the impact of weapons flows being cut. Cutting the current flow of aid to Ukraine would directly undermine President Trump's stated goal of achieving a sustainable peace in Ukraine. Ukrainian forces, enabled by essential US assistance, are inflicting unsustainable losses on Russian forces while holding them to marginal gains. Ukrainian efforts, aided by the steady flow of Western aid, have significantly slowed Russian advances along the front, inflicted significant Russian personnel and equipment losses, and undermined Russia's efforts to project economic and domestic stability amid rising pressures from the war. A suspension of ongoing US military assistance to Ukraine would encourage Russian President Putin to continue to increase his demands and fuel his conviction that he can achieve total victory through war. The cessation of US military assistance and monetary assistance aimed at strengthening Ukraine's defense industry could help tip the balance of the war and give Russia greater advantages on the battlefield in Ukraine, increasing the likelihood of a Russian victory in Ukraine. Russia would leverage a cessation of US aid to Ukraine to seize more territory in Ukraine and attempt to exhaust European support, the approach Putin has outlined in his theory of victory. Ending US aid to Ukraine and enabling further Russian gains would also embolden Putin and strengthen his belief that Russia can seize and control Ukraine and other former Soviet countries, including current NATO member states. The Kremlin will likely intensify its military campaign in Ukraine and attempt to exploit any delay or cessation of US military assistance to Ukraine, as the Kremlin did in spring 2024. And just to remind you, this is the third time that Trump has done this in the history of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, starting in 2014. So in 2019, he stopped aid to Ukraine that Congress had passed in order that Zelensky got him dirt on Hunter Biden and Burisma and whatnot. Zelensky refused to do that, partly because it didn't exist. He stopped aid then. He then stopped aid in 2023 to 2024, 7 months, and that caused the Russians to make huge gains on the battlefield and led to the death of many, unnecessarily to the death of many Ukrainians. So Trump has already killed Ukrainians. It's that simple. I say Trump has killed Ukrainians. He has then, so if you get these people that are coming on and saying, oh, you know, the war started because Biden was weak. Okay, if you want that kind of causality, well, deaths were caused to Ukrainians because Trump stopped aid to Ukraine. Let's do that then. So he did that, and now he's done it here. So this is the third time he's got form. Yeah, that's who he is. Now, our military, the government, have the capabilities, the tools to maintain the situation on the front line, says Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal. These are things that are not discussed publicly. It's interesting this. We will work with the European partners, G7 countries and the US so that Ukraine is strong and provided with everything necessary and can withstand and liberate its territories until the signing of a peace agreement, he says. And then we have Vadim Skibidi, Deputy Chief of Ukraine's Defense Intelligence, shares invaluable insights on the war. Russia's strategic plans remain unchanged, seeking full occupation and control of Ukraine. Their goal is to ensure Ukraine becomes neither neutral nor pro-Russian. The key shift, says Georgy Revishvili, after the full-scale invasion was Russia's initial belief that they could quickly seize all of Ukraine's territory. However, once fighting began and they encountered resistance, their plans began to adjust. Like I said, it was a special military operation, almost immediately became a war accidentally. They hadn't planned for it. Russia's objectives are constantly being modified. I wrote an article on that back in March, May, I can't remember, 2022, where I was saying they're now into plan B, C, D, E. Like their plans keep changing because they hadn't planned for this. Once the SMO wasn't a thing and it was a war, they had no objectives other than, well, our initial objective was to completely take the whole of Ukraine by changing the government. Just change the government, then we de facto control Ukraine. Then we can't do that, so we now need to invade all of Ukraine. So they tried to do that and piled in all their troops, but that failed, and then they had to retreat, and then they lost some land, and then we're where we're at now. So the question was, are you trying to take Donbass now? Are you trying to take these 4 oblasts? Are you trying to get to the Dnieper River? Are you still got maximalist intentions on Ukraine, etc., etc.? So now their primary goal for 2025 is to capture Donetsk and Luhansk, complete the special military operation, and maintain control over occupied territories like Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Crimea. Putin needs results there, but the so-called special military operation has not delivered any. The objective was liberate Luhansk and Donetsk from Ukrainian occupation within their administrative borders, but this remains unachieved. Luhansk Donetsk is not fully occupied, and with the current pace of Russia's offensive, it's unlikely that they will achieve the goal of Donetsk anytime soon. That's why Russia continues combat operations. We are observing a decrease in both the intensity of combat operations and, most notably, the frequency of direct engagements. The Russian troop presence remains significant, with over 620,000 servicemen stationed in our temporarily occupied territories and the Kursk region. Russia is actively regrouping its forces and replenishing its combat losses. Additionally, weather conditions have a direct impact on military engagements, operations. If we talk about the ground component, it consists of approximately 620,000 personnel, with more than 200,000 belonging to assault units actively engaged in combat and stationed on the front line. Additionally, there are 35,000 servicemen from Rosgvardia, so those are the riot police, who support the occupation authorities, guard key facilities in the temporarily occupied territories, and according to their plans, can be deployed as a second echelon force for defensive operations if necessary. However, we should not assume that a decrease in combat activity signifies a change in the enemy's plans. They are using this time to refine their offensive strategies, train personnel, replenish ammunition, and prepare for further assaults and offensive operations. So while they're culminating, of course, they're going to be reconstituting. If Russia succeeds advancing to the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region, the threat of conducting assault and reconnaissance operations will increase, while also reducing the range at which the enemy's artillery and multiple launch rocket systems can strike our infrastructure. Russians have significantly increased the production of unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, of various types. Previously in 23 and 24, early 24, we only knew of the Shahed drones, followed by Guran 1 and Guran 2. But today, the range of these drones is so vast, it's not always possible to count them on one hand. Guran 1, 2, Harpier, Gabera, Parodia, and others. Regarding the production of unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, within Russia, key production sites include Izhevsk, Yelabuga, and the Kalashnikov concern. They have significantly ramped up drone production, which now enables them to launch between 150 and 200 drones in a single strike. Since December 2024, North Korean troops have been directly involved in combat operations. During the first phase, they suffered significant losses. About 4,000 of the 11,000 were lost, quite heavy casualties for this period. However, they were later withdrawn for recovery and rest around the first decade of February. They were once again actively deployed to the front line in the Kursk region. Most importantly, North Korean soldiers have gained valuable combat experience with new technologies and tactics, including artillery combined with drones, FPV drones, electronic warfare systems, and reconnaissance tools. And of course, they have also been joined by further North Korean reinforcements since then. And I'm going to leave you with the ATP Geopolitics new NAFO campaign fundraiser that we're running with Rick the Ukrainian and Roman Trokimets. Fantastic, already 17% there, which is phenomenal. It's a big old 78,000 euros, but there are kind of three of us working on this. We've got a joint patch there for the two vehicles that are going to be between us, and then one vehicle each for our own patches, and that is the Owl of Minerva on the front with a quill and a gun. And I'll talk you through all of this when I formally start this campaign. And it is also worth noting that we in the end have added, this just blows my mind, added two whole extra drones to the Jiggers Paw fundraiser that we are doing. Yeah, so there you go, 21,000 there, and we're up to 24,300. So actually they're going to now push out to 24,500, and then we're just like 150 away from that. And there will be a raffle. I think I'm going to do a live stream with Jonathan Fink tomorrow at 2:00. Take that with a pinch of salt, TBC. But that will then allow us to do a raffle for all the people who have donated more than $20. So one ticket each for $20, and that'll get you some little goodies from Jiggers Paw and the units. So that's absolutely amazing. That is now actually 7 night drones, and we've pretty much done that. We just kept going over the threshold, and so we've added another 2 drones, 1 drone and then another drone. So that's amazing. Thank you. Anyway, that's enough from me. You guys take care. Check out that one's sort of effectively closed, so please check out the NAFO truck campaign. And this is the maxim I'm going with now. We'd rather have Ukrainian civilians die than Russian soldiers die in order to force peace. That is the White House calculation, and until they prove otherwise, that is what they appear to be doing. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pits.